The Gifford-Pinchot National Forest spans over 1 million acres of dense, unforgiving volcanic peaks and ancient trees. Within this vast green labyrinth, 19-year-old Moren Kelly sought a connection that transcended the physical world. She believed that to truly find herself, she had to shed every trapping of modern civilization. In a final act of devotion to her spiritual journey, Moren stripped off her clothes and left them in her vehicle. She stepped onto the damp earth with nothing but her own skin and a sense of divine purpose. Her goal was the summit of a nearby peak, a place she believed held high vibrational energy. The temperature in the forest was dropping rapidly as night began to descend. Family members grew worried when Moren failed to return by the following morning. A massive search operation was launched with bloodhounds and helicopters scouring the Cascades. Searchers eventually found a set of small, bare footprints pressed into the soft mud of a service road. These prints tracked clearly along the shoulder of the road for several hundred yards. Then, without warning, the tracks simply vanished in the middle of a flat stretch of pavement. There were no signs of a struggle, no dragging marks, and no tire tracks from another vehicle. The bloodhounds reached the spot where the footprints ended and began to whine in confusion. Some believe Moren achieved the spiritual transition she so desperately sought. Others point to the possibility of a highly opportunistic and silent predator, human or otherwise. Years have passed and not a single shred of clothing or bone has ever been recovered. The Gifford-Pinchot Forest remains a silent witness to a girl who walked out of our reality. But Moren's case is not the only time the wilderness has swallowed someone whole. Deep in the rocky trenches of the high Sierras, another pattern was about to emerge. Reverend Maurice Damitz was an experienced outdoorsman who knew the risks of the terrain. He set out on a routine rock hunting trip, a hobby that brought him immense peace. He was seen by friends just minutes before he rounded a bend and vanished from sight. When his companions followed, the trail was empty, as if the earth had simply opened up. Search teams explored every crevice and cave within a 5-mile radius. Days turned into weeks, and the search was eventually hampered by a freak snowstorm. The Reverend had vanished in a location where it should have been impossible to hide. But the Sierras were not finished claiming visitors that year. 14-year-old Stacy Arras was part of a larger group on a guided photography hike. She asked her father if she could walk just a few yards ahead to photograph a specific cluster of trees. Her father watched her walk toward the trees, never losing sight of her for more than a second. When she stepped behind a small rock formation, she never emerged from the other side. The entire group began calling her name, but only the mountain echoes replied. One of the only clues found was Stacy's camera lens cap, sitting perfectly level on a boulder. It looked as though it had been placed there deliberately, rather than dropped in a panic. Despite thousands of man-hours spent searching the area, Stacy Arras vanished without a footprint. These cases defy the laws of physics and the logic of tracking. It is as if some individuals are picked out of time by a force we cannot perceive. This brings us to a man who didn't just disappear into the woods, but may have mastered the very fabric of space. Ettore Majorana, a genius physicist, vanished from a steamship after leaving a note that hinted at a choice between life and the unknown. What did he discover in the subatomic world that made him fear for his own existence? As we look closer at his final days, the line between a missing person and a scientific breakthrough begins to blur. For Majorana, the woods were not the trap, but rather the very air he breathed held the secret to his escape. If the brilliant Majorana vanished into the equations of the universe, others have been swallowed by the very earth beneath their feet. We turn our gaze now to the rugged landscapes where the mundane act of walking becomes a precursor to an impossible disappearance. In the summer of 1981, Reverend Maurice Damitz set out into the mountains of Washington state. Maurice was not a man of impulsivity, but a dedicated hobbyist with a passion for rock hunting. He was last seen by his companions near a series of deep natural trenches in the earth. When his friends turned their heads for a mere moment, the Reverend was simply gone. Search teams arrived quickly, descending into the very trenches he had been admiring. They found nothing but the cold, damp silence of the underground stone. No clothing, no tools, and no signs of a fall were ever discovered in those dark depths. The case of Maurice Damitz remains a scar on the landscape of the Cascades. But as baffling as the Reverend's disappearance was, it pales in comparison to the event at Yosemite. In 1981, 14-year-old Stacy Arras was enjoying a high-country horse trip with her father and friends. They reached the Sunrise High Sierra Camp, a place of stunning beauty and thin air. Stacy wanted to take photographs of the nearby lake before the light failed. An elderly member of the party decided to walk with her, but he soon grew tired. He watched her walk just a few yards ahead, disappearing behind a small cluster of trees. That was the last time any human being ever laid eyes on Stacy Arras. When she didn't return within minutes, the alarm was raised and the search began. This wasn't a standard search, it became one of the most exhaustive in Yosemite's history. Helicopters buzzed overhead and bloodhounds were brought in to catch her scent. The dogs, usually reliable, became confused and lost the trail almost immediately. They only found one item, the lens cap from Stacy's camera, lying on the ground. It was sitting right where she had been seen, yet there was no sign of a struggle. To this day, Yosemite National Park refuses to release the full case file on Stacy Arras. Why would a missing persons case from 1981 still be under such heavy secrecy? Both Damitz and Arras disappeared in areas that were heavily scrutinized by experts. In both cases, the environment seemed to conspire to hide the truth. These aren't just stories of people getting lost, they are stories of people being removed. If they didn't walk away and they weren't taken by animals, where could they have gone? Some researchers suggest that certain locations on Earth act as silent zones. In these zones, the laws of physics might operate differently than we understand. The Reverend was a man of God. Perhaps he found a doorway he wasn't meant to see. Stacy was just a child, her life and future erased in the blink of an eye. The search for Stacy involved over 100 people and lasted for weeks. They combed every inch of the Sunrise area, yet she was never found. It is as if the mountain itself opened its mouth and swallowed her whole. These vanishings leave a void that no amount of investigation can fill. But what if the cause isn't found in the woods, but in the people themselves? We must consider the possibility that some minds are tuned to frequencies we cannot hear. This brings us back to the mysterious Ettore Majorana and his radical theories. For if a man can calculate the end of time, he can surely find a way to step out of it. If a man can calculate the end of time, he can surely find a way to step out of it. Ettore Majorana was not merely a scientist, he was a ghost even before he vanished. His colleagues, including Enrico Fermi, regarded his intellect as something beyond the human norm. In March of 1938, the young genius withdrew a significant sum of money from his bank account. He packed a small suitcase with his research notes and a few personal items. He sent a cryptic letter to his family, asking them not to mourn him for more than 3 days. Then he boarded the steamship Tirrenia, scheduled to travel from Naples to Palermo. Passengers recalled seeing a man matching his description standing alone at the ship's railing. When the ship docked in the morning, his cabin was found completely empty. There was no sign of a struggle, and no suicide note was left behind on the vessel. Some theorists suggest he fled to South America to escape the looming shadow of the Second World War. He was a pacifist who foresaw the terrifying potential of the atomic bomb long before others. Others believe his obsession with quantum physics led him to a much more radical conclusion. He often spoke of practical metaphysics, the idea that the laws of physics could be bent by the mind. Could a man of his intellect have discovered the secret to physical teleportation? Like the footprints in the Gifford Pinchot forest, his trail simply ceased to exist in mid-stride. For decades, the mystery of the physicist remained as cold as the depths of the sea. In 2015, the Italian authorities officially closed the case after new evidence surfaced. A photograph taken in Venezuela in the 1950s appeared to show a man who looked remarkably like an older Majorana. If he did escape to South America, he achieved the ultimate goal of his life: total anonymity. This brings us back to the heart of every vanishing we have explored today. Whether it is a teenage girl in the woods or a genius on a ship, the pattern remains the same. Nature has pockets where the rules we understand no longer seem to apply. We search for bodies, for clothing, and for clues to ease the pain of the families left behind. But sometimes the wilderness refuses to give up its secrets, holding them tight in its silent embrace. Majorana's story reminds us that even our greatest minds are humbled by the unknown. We have walked through the 5 enigmas, from the physical to the metaphysical. Moren Kelly's spirit may still roam the Gifford Pinchot, free from the constraints of society. Stacy Arras and Reverend Dammit's have become part of the very rocks and earth they sought to study. And Ettore Majorana perhaps found the peace he calculated in the margins of his notebooks. We may never find the answers to these vanishings, but we find meaning in the asking. The human spirit is defined by its drive to explore the dark corners of our world. Even when the trail ends, the story continues in the minds of those who remember. We honor the missing by refusing to let their memories fade into the mist. For in every mystery there is a lesson about the fragility of our own existence. As we close these files, we step back into our own lives with a renewed sense of wonder. The world is larger than our maps and deeper than our science can currently reach. Let us respect the silence of the woods and the secrets of the sea, for the missing are not truly gone as long as their names are still spoken. This journey ends here, but the enigmas remain, waiting for the next curious soul to find them. Good night, and may you always find your way back home,